Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Miami Heat needed some firepower this offseason, but does their latest move actually move the needle? Also, the MLB All-Star game needed some new blood, and it got it. 19 first-time All-Stars. Plus, the NFC South might have our next Super Bowl champion.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Miami Heat made a trade, not the Kevin Durant trade, but they get Norman Powell for basically nothing. Kyle Anderson, Kevin Love, as part of a 3-team deal that also sends John Collins to LA. Wes Goldberg from Locked On Heat joins me now. And Wes, Miami had been rumored or reported to be in on Kevin Durant, though modestly so, it seems. There is the obvious connection with Damian Lillard. Now that Damian Lillard has an opportunity to choose his destination here, what do you make of what the Heat have done so far this offseason and what could still be to come here?
Well, for most of the offseason so far, it's been very disappointing because this is a team that won 37 games last year, got wiped in the first round of the playoffs by the Cleveland Cavaliers, and seemed like they were walking down the path of potentially just running it back, which isn't good enough, right? They were, as you said, reportedly involved in the Kevin Durant trade talks, but they were not all in on Kevin Durant. They had looked at themselves in the mirror during those Durant negotiations and said, we're not a Durant away from being where we want to be.
Yeah.
And we're not going to give up the farm to go get Kevin Durant and just be a little bit closer, certainly, but to give up everything and mortgage the future and not really be able to improve the team around Kevin Durant and Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, we're just not interested in doing that. And so they backtracked a little bit. They went backwards and they said, nope, we're gonna focus on flexibility. We're gonna focus on the youth movement. We're gonna take somebody with the 20th pick in the draft, who, you know, they take Kasparas Yakachonis, who they're very happy with getting there, and they're gonna try to just build out the rest of the roster. Now, Norman Powell is 30 years old, and they go ahead and trade for this guy, but he's also an expiring contract. He's also a very good player, borderline All-Star in the Western Conference last year. And this, as you said, you gotta get him for next to nothing. It's a no-brainer. It's a home run of a deal for Miami, and it's the kind of thing that can jolt the offense in the short term, and I think in a meaningful way in the Eastern Conference, while not giving up some of that long-term flexibility that you've decided to prioritize.
How do you think the rest of the East impacts the way that Miami is looking at all of this? Because Tyrese Halliburton has the major injury with the Achilles. Jason Tatum has the same. We don't know what's going to happen with a team like Milwaukee who let go of Damian Lillard. Like, this is still Eric Spoelstra. This is still the core of Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero. Pat Riley believes in the draft and develop and all that stuff. How do you think the Eastern Conference plays into all this?
It's a great question, and it's actually why I thought that they would have made the Kevin Durant trade. But let's also remember that Kevin Durant trade was finalized with Houston the day before Tyrese Halliburton tore his Achilles. I always wonder, I would love to know, had the trade happened after Game 7 of the NBA Finals, would the Heat have said, you know what, it's open, let's push more chips into the middle of the table here? But I don't know. I mean, the Heat have also not usually responded that way. They don't tend to play the market that way. This is not a day trading team. This is a team that wants to just throw some money into some mutual funds and plan for long-term growth and just believe in themselves. And that's sort of what they do here. So they have a price, in other words, in mind, and they usually don't go over that. They didn't do it for Damian Lillard. They didn't do it for Donovan Mitchell, and they didn't do it 4 different times for Kevin Durant. So here we are. I do think that the team does look at the Eastern Conference, though, and says, you know what, maybe we can make a little bit of a run here. We can get out of the first round of the playoffs for the first time since we made the run to the 2023 NBA Finals. And that is growth. That is a step forward. And this team doesn't look at stuff the way that I think a lot of NBA fans look at stuff in terms of, hey, if you're middling, that's the worst thing to do, treadmill mediocrity, so-and-so and such and such. They say, you know what, we're just interested in getting better. Let's just get better. And I think this trade did that.
I'm imagining Pat Riley with his Robinhood account out there trying to find some plus EV out there. So Wes, speaking of finding some plus EV, is there something out there you think that they could do that would still move the needle? There were some connections, obviously, the Damian Lillard the first time, Bradley Beal potentially out there, at least as we record this. Anything you think could move the needle for them?
So I think this trade does take them out of the Bradley Beal stuff, although I wouldn't rule it out completely. But I think they make this trade because they were ready to let Beal walk to one of his other destinations that has reportedly been linked to. But they would be interested in Damian Lillard. The problem with Damian Lillard, as you know, is that he's out for the year with an Achilles. So they could add him. They could let him rehab in South Florida and Miami for a while, or they could just wait. And Damian Lillard can just wait, right? And that seems to be the reporting around Lillard right now. They do have an open roster spot, which I found very interesting. In doing this trade, they did open up a roster spot. They also went slightly into the luxury tax, which they want to avoid. They're $1.3 million into the tax right now. So that said, I think there are some scenarios that involve potentially Andrew Wiggins or Terry Rozier where you can send a player out, bring a player or two back now, and potentially reduce payroll. I think those things are out there. I think those things are options. And if we've learned anything, I think so far during this offseason for Miami, it's that maybe they're not looking at these big swings. Maybe they're just looking at getting incrementally better. And I still think that some of those moves could potentially be out there.
You can stay up to date all year on the Miami Heat by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Heat on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Your Locked On Sports Today coming up. The Major League Baseball All-Star Game will feature a plethora of new faces. Before we get to that, Tyrese Halliburton won't be back for a while. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups all summer long, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions, fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out. It makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I am part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's heartbreak in Indy. The Pacers confirmed Monday that All-Star guard Tyrese Halliburton will miss the entire 2025-2026 season after tearing his Achilles in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Halliburton played through a calf injury before going down in the second half, a decision he says he'd make again. Now the franchise shifts its focus to recovery and the long road back. Over on the diamond, the Giants hosted the Phillies.
A whole lot of terrible went into the Phillies, dropping their first game of the 6-game West Coast trip 3-1 to the San Francisco Giants. But first, let's talk about what was incredible, and that was Christopher Sanchez. 7 innings of 1-run baseball, striking out 8, all by way of the changeup. A thing of beauty yet again for Christopher Sanchez. But stop me if you heard this one before. Great start by a Phillies pitcher, and then terrible offense. Phillies 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position against the Giants. 0 for their last 24 with runners in scoring position overall. The only run they got in this game came when Bryson Stott was on third base, and he managed to score on a wild pitch. Nobody even drove him in. That's the way that one fell. More terrible, though, Orion Kerkering had his worst outing in months. He allows 2 runs to score, hit 2 batters for the San Francisco Giants, and also didn't get any help from Phil Cuzzi, who also was terrible. That 8th inning, some of the worst umpiring you've seen all year.
The Dodgers look to get back in the win column on the road against the Brewers.
The Brewers, a home underdog. I don't care if they're playing the 27 Yankees. I love the Brewers when they're a home underdog, and they came through, and the Brewers get the job done. Hey, everybody, Chuck Freeman, Instant Reaction, Locked On Brewers. Andrew Vaughn, when the Brewers... A thing with the Brewers is when a guy gets traded to the Brewers or he gets called up from AAA, the Brewers don't waste any time. They just put him in the lineup right away. If they called up Andrew Vaughn, hit the first inning, 3-run home run. They don't want this guy wasted on the bench. They just baptize him right away. And then Freddie does Freddie things. Peralta was terrific again tonight. And the Brewers take the opener against a depleted Dodgers team. It looked like the Dodgers were somewhat going through the motions after the Brewers got that early lead. Let's face it, the Dodgers kind of mailed that one in. They've lost 4 in a row. Hey, they could do that for the next 2 days. I'd be good with that. See you tonight. Next edition of Locked On Brewers. Talk about all this. See you then. Please subscribe.
And the WNBA officiating is under fire again, this time from Angel Reese. After the Chicago Sky's narrow loss to Minnesota, the polarizing Reese didn't hold back, saying it has to be fixed. I'm tired of this. Her frustration stemmed from a lopsided free throw count, and she's not the only player to voice similar complaints in recent weeks. This is not uncommon for players to be frustrated with officiating, but this has gotten to a point where the league may have to take a look at its processes or start handing out fines. 19 first-time All-Stars for the Major League Baseball Midsummer Classic. Our pal Sully from Locked On MLB joins us now to talk about this and a lot more here as we change gears into full-on baseball season, as we get into the dog days of summer. And Sully, is this, as you look at 19, that's a lot of names. Is there something unique happening in baseball right now, or do you think we're going to look back on this as an aberrational type season?
Well, I think every once in a while you see there's a big new wave of stars who come into the game. I think a big reason why you're seeing a lot of new names in the pitcher column is that teams aren't really interested in developing ace pitchers anymore. You see that 5 1/3 is the equivalent of being Jack Morris in Game 7 of the World Series, throwing 10 shutout innings. And that isn't because of analytics. It isn't because pitchers aren't tougher. It's economics. That the most expensive commodity is a ace pitcher. So let's create a world where we don't need them. And therefore, we're not seeing a new generation of aces who go 7-8 innings a start really coming up. And we're still recycling Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, and I'm sure someone would give CC Sabathia another start, but he's being elected to the Hall of Fame this year. Sandy Koufax appeared at a recent event at Dodger Stadium, and Dave Roberts asked him, "Can you give me 3 today?" I mean, that's just basically the way it is. And so you're seeing a lot of pitchers who are being added to the All-Star game. And I don't think there's anyone who is, a bad choice, but you're seeing that there's a lot of you're seeing, more relievers, like Randy Rodriguez, for example, who, by the way, I love that Randy Rodriguez is on the All-Star team. He's having a phenomenal season for the San Francisco Giants, a grand total of 7 people outside of Fremont, California, know about him, but his numbers are off the charts because he doesn't get wins or doesn't get saves, but he's having a fantastic season. But you're going to see more players like him being in there as opposed to, you'll see there, Mackenzie Gore, some young people like Paul Skeens, Mackenzie Gore are on there as well. But you also have everyone holding their breath of when their arm is going to come off, like the Black Knight and Monty Python and the Holy Grail in the middle of a start.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that has a lot to do.
Sully?
Yes, tis but a scratch.
Yeah.
That's sadly that's Clark Schmidt right now. It is but a scratch, but there you go.
How much of this do you think is the way that baseball has changed as well? Because now they're leaning into the variance, and I wonder if it's like, well, hey, whoever gets the right part of the variance in the first 2.5 months of the season and hits a bunch of home runs is going to end up on the All-Star team. Whereas back, for years it was, okay, you got to be a 300 hitter and those kinds of things. Whereas that's just not what we're worried about anymore.
No, it isn't, and that has its good and bad qualities. I mean, the batting average is a flawed metric, and I'm not even a big analytics guy, but I recognize that if you go 1 for 4 with 3 walks, well, you're a 250 hitter. Is that the same? And by the way, who was always ahead of the game on this was Ricky Henderson. Because Ricky Henderson in the 80s said, "I don't look at my batting average, I look at my on-base percentage." People are like, "Oh, there's Ricky being so kooky," and no, he was right on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the case. I think one of my biggest problems with the All-Star game is that it penalizes people who have great second halves. I mean, we've seen many times people who've won the MVP, won the Cy Young Award, but aren't on the All-Star team. Likewise, you'll see the likes of Tyler Green, who had a good 2 months in 1995 and finished the season with an ERA over 5. and he gets to have All-Star on his baseballreference.com page. By the way, Kirk Gibson doesn't have All-Star on his baseball reference. Never named to an All-Star team. Kirk Gibson. Tim Salmon, never named to an All-Star team. I am tied with Kirk Gibson for All-Star game appearances, and he won the MVP. Now, you could argue he shouldn't have won the MVP that year because you could argue that it should have been Arnold Hershiser. You could argue it could have been Darryl Strawberry. That's fine, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Kirk Gibson was one of the biggest stars of 1988. I know that's controversial, but that it's if you have a good first half, that's great, and if you have a phenomenal second half and carry the team over the hump, like Jake Arrieta did with the Cubs in 2015, won the Cy Young Award that year, did not make the All-Star team.
Stay up to date all year on Major League Baseball by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On MLB on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Bucs ceiling might be a little higher than you think. There seems to be some hesitance to buy into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers despite the fact that they won the South in consecutive seasons. Locked On NFL host Tony Wiggins and Julian Council break down why the Bucs' underrated talent and consistent coaching could push them deep into the postseason.
All right, so I got a buddy of mine that I ran I didn't run the subject matter by him, but I did want to get a feel. He's a Bucs fan. I wanted to get a feel for how he felt. He said, Wig, I think they're going to be very good, but it doesn't matter because I'm not a big fan of Todd Bowles. A lot of people are fans of Todd Bowles, the person, but they're not fans of Todd Bowles, the coach.
Interesting. I mean, well, you look at it, whenever Todd Bowles, even back in New York with the Jets, had a good quarterback, or at least good quarterback play, he had capable teams. And he only had one season where Ryan Fitzpatrick was really good for them. They had that win in overtime against Tom Brady and the Patriots in like week 16. And then the next week, Fitzpatrick all but soiled himself in the snow in Buffalo. And that cost him a chance to go to the playoffs as Pittsburgh went instead of them. So, and you look at the last couple of years, like with Baker, who's played really well, whether it was last year under Liam Cohen as the OC, then the year prior with Dave Canales, who's now in Carolina as the OC. Like, we have seen the best of Baker. I understand, like, there still seems to be like kind of this like hesitance to believe in Todd Bowles as the head coach. But when you're out there winning division after division, which he's done so far, and clearly the players buy into what he's doing, he's hiring the right people. That's such a big thing. Think about it. Like, you had to hire Dave Canales after it didn't work out there. And then you brought in Liam Cohen after Dave left. Now Cohen has left and you have elevated who was underneath Liam Cohen. Like, that is such an important part of this job that I don't think people really recognize, understand. That's like the part of, you don't want to hire a defensive head coach because then you're always going to be replacing your offensive coordinator, but they can find the right guys. Like Dan Campbell. Does anyone think like Dan Campbell necessarily is like this head coaching, like genius football guru? Don't get me wrong. Like, obviously he knows the game far more than all of us know for the most part. But like, he's hired really good people. Aaron Glenn, and he's gone on to be head coach now. He hired Ben Johnson, who was like the wonder kid the last couple of years, who finally left to go to Chicago. And then we'll see what his new hire is able to do. And then you've seen what Jared Goff was able to do the last couple of years, just what that organization's become. So
the offense last year took an enormous step forward thanks to the run game from Liam Cohen. Liam Cohen now coaches Tony Wiggins' team in Jacksonville. Todd Bowles is still the coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but their defense has not been the heartbeat of their team in a while now, really since that Super Bowl season. The defense is not good enough as currently constructed to win a Super Bowl unless the offense goes supernova, and the architect of that offense coaches in another part of the state. I just don't see it. I don't see Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin being good enough. They were good, right, with Dave Canales, good enough to get him a head coaching job. But then they got even better with Liam Cohen. Are we expecting them to get even better when they weren't good enough last year, when the defense wasn't good enough last year? Why would they be even better this year with the brain drain and the lack of additions made on the defensive front? The pass rush, the pass defense, it's still not going to be very good. So they're going to win a bunch of games 40-34 with Baker Mayfield? I don't think so. And finally, only at Wimbledon could a rogue cork popping become a match interruption. Last week, someone in the crowd popped a bottle mid-serve during Amanda Anisimova's first round match. Anisimova's frustrated, asked the fan, "Why are you opening it right now?" Prompting the umpire to issue what might be the most British warning in sports history. "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, if you could avoid opening bottles of champagne while the players are about to serve." Maybe at least wait for the changeover next time. Come on. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up, is LeBron looking to make a move out of LA, or at least out of a Lakers uniform? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.